Good to go? Okay. Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Right. Sue, would you like to open with Parakia, please?
Certainly. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa pounamu te moana, he huarahi mā tātou I tā rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tata ia, tata katoa. Kia ora.
Good, thank you for that. Morning, Councillor Ash.
Sir, yeah, I made it to the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. So we don't need your apologies. We have an apology from Councillor Petter. Can I have a mover, please? Seconded, Mayor Craig. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Confirmation of the agenda. We don't have Alex. Have we heard from Alex yet? Can't get hold of him. Okay, so what we might have to do is wait. Come back to him. Okay, in terms of the, I've lost it now.
Finance report.
The Treasury report, 4.1. We just might leave that until our, Alex Wondergem comes online. Are there any conflicts of interest that need?
Sorry.
Oh, a minute. Yeah, sorry, what have I lost?
Chair, just can we move and second the confirmation of the agenda?
Oh, yeah. I'll move, seconded. Thank you. Thank you, Alani. That's your job, is to keep me in line, which is very difficult, most important job. Are there any conflicts of interest that need to be declared? No decisions? Okay, any public items on the public forum? There are none. Confirmation of our minutes pages 3 to 10 on the electronic version. I know I'm down the bottom. Can I have a mover, please?
Yeah, I'll move.
Were you here?
Yep.
Yep. All right. Can I have a seconder? I'll second. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
It's carried. We'll just hold the Treasury report on 4.1. The next item then becomes the finance report on page 15 to 21. Thank you, Jessie.
Morning, everybody.
Morning, Jesse.
So this is a finance report at 30 April. It has been reported to Council in May's meeting. So I won't go over everything again, but I'm happy to take questions. One thing that has come up that I thought you should know since that report is that Ventia have come through and said that they've calculated $1.2 million of storm damage work that they've not ever invoiced us for, and they're trying to recover it from us for the 2023 year. So it might, it's for work that was done before 30 June 2023, and it has not been invoiced. So it's just in a bit of a possible at the moment. Our engineers are negotiating or trying to defend against it and asking for more information. So at this point, I'm not sure about it and what will actually happen with it.
And of course, there will be no subsidy on it because of subsidy.
It's being investigated as well.
Yeah.
I don't understand I don't believe you'd be able to get a retrospective subsidy, but somebody's asking NZTA.
Yep.
So we'll see, but essentially it's never been invoiced. So just waiting to see what will happen with that one.
Thank you. Councillor Ash, thank you for your hand.
Yeah, no, thanks. Just a quick question. I guess a few millions we have to invoice to NZTA as well. Have we invoiced or not? That is about the detour route things we did.
Yes, so I've been following that up with the roading staff about there's, in addition to this matter that I've just talked about, there's $3.3 million around about waiting to be invoiced to NZTA. I'm following up the roading team, Ash, but they haven't been able to invoice it yet.
I think we should get that first before we pay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? The chief executive and your big capital expenditure person's not here, but I'm therefore going to defect the question to Sue. So in terms of CapEx, what's the impacts? Can you help us understand what are the risks around not delivering the CapEx?
So council is aware that we presented a paper to them as part of the LTP that the likely implication is that there'll be up to 24 million that will be potentially it's probably more than that, but at least 24 million that will be transferred through to the next year. The General Manager Infrastructure has said that he believes that we'll be able to do that work because he's positioning it so that it's ready to be completed. Most of the design would have been done. So he's still of that opinion. I mean, history would say that it hasn't, and that won't occur, and we should be pushing capital out further. But that hasn't happened in the LTP, so it will go. And the good thing that's happened for our ratepayers is that most of the 24 million that's to be carried over is actually debt funded. So therefore, we're not taking up the debt that we initially thought we would be because we've been completing externally funded projects. And we're also, and it means our starting point is lesser, but the finishing point is still the same because nothing else has been pushed out.
Yep.
You know, we're still looking at 72 million because we're anticipating this huge capital works program.
But less immediate cost per ratepayers.
Yes, in year one. So, look, that's where we're at the moment. We've got infrastructure saying they believe they can complete it. Yeah,
Yep.
and yeah.
In the 24 million in year one,
Yes,
rather than spread it over two.
yeah.
Now, that actually raises a question, I think Alex is online, but how does that actually then impact on your debt and your interest and your swaps, etc.? So
It does. So it makes it really difficult. We can't come up with cash flows because nothing's sensible.
yep,
And that's why we don't,
yeah,
So I do believe it's one area that we should be looking at in the future we've had so much historical proving that we can't complete all the projects.
okay, all right. I've got Councillor Mike and then I've got Councillor Ash.
Okay, just still on the financial report, and Jessie, I two questions, and thank you for that update regarding Ventia, because it sort of applies to what I was going to ask. Is that do we have, given that we are now almost mid-June, do we have any significant updates from May? Was going to be my question.
Those numbers are still being processed, and what's the last thing to process are the roading accruals. We have to wait for them to tell us what their work in progress is.
Yep.
So unfortunately, I don't really have an
Okay.
update at this point, but I should in the next few days.
And we've got 10.9 million sitting in budget on depreciation. There is budget year to date. What I've said here is what thoughts on what and how much we could possibly apply to projects, i.e. be utilising that.
That's a difficult question. I'm possibly not understanding your question actually, Mike. So
Well, and is there any offset on the LTP, so depreciation funds?
So that's what is also impacted as well as the interest, is that if you don't complete the project, then you have less depreciation.
Yep.
So that could impact on what we put in the LTP on depreciation as well. I'm not sure if we're that sophisticated on. We're just about to change to a new budgeting system and a fixed asset system in the next year. So that will be when we get far more sophisticated with our budgeting. But I don't know that with the depreciation but that's what should happen.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess that's what I'm getting at, is that there
On
are
the three waters.
potential implications.
Yes.
You know, both in terms of the P&L, but also in the LTP and what happens with what we allocate for depreciation. That's what I'm just trying to,
No,
okay,
you're correct.
Yep, okay. Okay, anything else?
thanks.
Councillor Ash again?
Yeah, thank you, Philip. Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions quickly. One, the 42K from Moonlight, are they recoverable from the developers?
That's right, they are, Nash.
Mate.
Councillor Nair, yes, they are.
Yeah, and the second thing is the works, capital works, which we are progressing to the next year, the share. Can we have a look at the account, how much money is sitting, which we have already collected from the ratepayers and we haven't delivered? So we should not be double slapping them with the rate rise,
So
the
through-
23 million.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
through the chair,
Yeah.
you're correct, and we have looked at that, but most of the projects are debt funded and there's very little interest and debt repayment in the first year because we don't estimate that they're built on day one. So that isn't really an issue, but we have gone back to make sure that we're not double counting on rates for the LTP and looking at employee benefits, where we've been down 1.5 to 1.7 million in both years. So that's being offset against the one-off costs next year that we're expecting for storm damage.
Okay, no, that's thank you. Just lastly, I would like to see, and we never see, what's the money sitting in the account and this overdraft accounts. All we get is the financial reports. So my worry is like this 10 million we are sitting on doing nothing. There might be some money sitting in our bank accounts, which can be put to use to reducing the rate rise. Maybe at the next briefing, if we can get some information on what is the money in the bank, please.
Mr Nash, again, Mr Nair,
Not
there
Nash,
is the
Ash.
last page, Ash, there is the last page of that report. They'll show you the cash in the bank.
Thank you.
And if I can give council some general advice, right? That money that's accumulated surpluses, if you do have it, right? I would not recommend you use that for saving to reduce the rate requirement as a reduction on operational costs, because next year you then have to go and find that plus play catch up. But so I would be looking to either reduce your debt or for one-off operational projects that are not recurring, could only use it for that, not just take it off rates. Otherwise you're digging yourself a very deep hole, which then you've got to dig yourself out of, and that's even worse.
So through the chair, that's what we've done, exactly what you said.
Yeah.
So not using it for business as usual.
Yes.
There's some have done in other councils.
And some have done it consistently in other councils, and I think that's potentially why some councils are now seeing significant rate increases. Jessie, thank you for that. I've got a question. No. So you're saying in October on page 21 of the agenda, page 7, you're going to reduce 10 million off debt. So is that coming from your term deposit currently of 19 million, is that?
That's right. 10 million of that 19 million has been set aside for that repayment, part of the refinancing strategy.
Okay, and that's not going to upset our liquidity ratios?
That's why it was done. So it was to make sure that we were compliant with the Treasury policy.
Thank you. Okay, no other questions? Thank you, Jessie. Can I have a move for the recommendation that we note the finance report? Councillor Aaron, seconded. Councillor Mike, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Now we will go back to item 4.1, page 11 to 44. Thank you, Julia. Welcome. Can Alex hear us? Not yet.
Yes.
Welcome, Alex. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see your pretty face yet.
Give me 1 second.
Yep, that's good. Thank you, Alex. Nice to see you.
Likewise.
Right. Julia, this is your report, supported by Alex.
Thank you. Morena, Your Worship, Chair and elected members. Ko Julia Aho. I present to you the Treasury report for the period ended 30th of April 2024. It is for information only to update you on the financial position of Council with 4 key ratios and whether we are complying with the Treasury policy. If you recall, we regained compliance for our funding and liquidity position with refinancing activities carried out in March. However, we remain outside of compliance for interest rate risk. Interest rate swaps are commonly used by councils throughout Aotearoa as a mechanism to mitigate or to reduce the risk associated with fluctuating interest rates. The report states that staff were in the process of executing $15 million worth of swap agreements in May. However, these were not executed due to volatility in the market and also following the advice given by our Treasury advisors at PwC. These will be executed before the end of June so that compliance with the Treasury policy is regained for year end. And aside from this note, all else remains as reported in the Treasury report. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to ask them.
Thank you. Alex, have you got anything to add?
I was going to.
Oh, you've got a separate session?
I was going to say, otherwise, yeah, I'll hand over to Alex.
Oh, okay.
To talk through the strategy.
I think Councillor Ash has got a question.
Yeah, quick one. Actually, I worked like 6 hours on this agenda, so I have lots of questions, sorry. But just a quick one, coming back to all those 23 millions, which is debt funded. What portion of it is on swaps? And we are paying interest on that at 6%, isn't it?
I'm not sure I'm following the question, Councillor Naya.
Well, the question is, we have been told that the projects which have not been executed are debt funded. So I want to know, we are still paying interest for that delay in execution. What portion is on swaps? Or what portion you are proposing to be put on 15% swap? Yeah. If you get it right.
So on, there's a table in my report that shows the interest rate position ratios. What it does is it looks at the total debt as a whole. It doesn't look at what has been carried out, what has been executed, what has been carried forward. It just looks at the entire 54 million that we have as public debt at the moment in the age buckets, and it looks at the interest rate swaps that we have in those same age buckets, and it should be within certain percentages, certain parameters. So in order to answer your question, unfortunately, I don't have that detail. That's
okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
Can I just help there? I think I sort of needs a little bit of interpretation. What Sue said was the projects were scheduled to be debt funded. And my understanding is you won't actually raise the debt until you've actually taken the money out. Is that what you're actually saying? That 24 million of unspent money? Is that that's the way I interpret?
Raise any new debt until we need to, for those debt funded.
Correct. Okay. Yes.
We talk about 15 million in swaps. It's just the agreement. We're not paying 15 million. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does that answer you? Does that help, Councillor?
Well, it helps a little bit. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? You said you got a number of questions.
At this moment, sir. Thank you.
Is that all? Oh, sorry, you.
Yeah, that's all at the moment.
I thank you. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Cool. Otherwise, I'm going to hand over to Alex Wondergem from PwC, who will be able to talk through our strategy a little bit more and why we didn't enter into our swap agreements in May.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
Floor is yours.
Excellent. Thanks everyone. Look, those agreements weren't executed in May due to there being a number of kind of significant financial market events which would see volatility. And the aim and purpose of interest rate hedging is to provide certainty and reduce volatility. And so, look, the rationale there essentially is not taking a large or significant market position when it is very variable and fluctuating at the moment. So a number of those macroeconomic events were unfolding over the last 2 weeks. In fact, two of those occurred in the early hours of this morning as well. And look, it's really looking to make sure that we're spreading the execution and implementation of the strategy to avoid any particular kind of volatility around where those rates may be given those events. Largely that is now passed, particularly with today's and this morning's announcements, which came from the US in terms of their inflation reading and outlook from the US Federal Reserve. What we have seen is the market has moved more favourably for you in terms of level of interest rate fixing over the last month, and that therefore is going to be an opportunity for you to be executing your strategy to achieve what is a minimum level of compliance with policy. So this isn't looking at a strategy to materially increase the level of fixing above the minimum parameters of policy. This is looking to get you to this, essentially the starting line. It does bring into account the market's expectation of a fairly substantive number of interest rate cuts being priced in. So where you're currently paying on that 15 million at the floating interest rate to the LGFA, that's presently around 5.65%. The blended fixed rate of the swaps that you're looking at is going to be closer to 4.3% over the term. So there will be an immediate cash flow benefit to you, and that is capturing the expectation of interest rate decline. So whilst interest rates are elevated, markets are forward-looking. They are pricing in those declines. They are pricing in a reasonably aggressive pace of those declines. You do have an opportunity to provide certainty to your plans and your budgets and forecasts at a lower interest cost than you're currently paying, and then achieving policy compliance position as well at a minimum level.
Okay.
So we expect the strategy to be implemented over the coming week or so.
Okay. Thanks, Alex. I wasn't awake when the Federal Reserve actually made their decision, all right, and announced it. I sort of tend to I need my beauty sleep. Probably everyone in the room probably actually totally agrees with that. Yeah. So what's the Federal Reserve actually really saying? Because so the Federal Reserve, I mean, that basically looks, the US rate, just correct me if I'm wrong, drives the longer term rate, whereas the OCR drives the shorter term rate. Just so that everyone's just clarifying that's still what's happening in the market.
Yeah, that's correct. And so whilst that might feel a little hard to kind of draw that conclusion in terms of how a change by US interest rate settings impacts interest costs for the Kaipara District Council, that is the case. So the US Federal Reserve this morning, I was awake and watched the press conference. That's what I do. Really stated that they do believe it is appropriate at some point in time to be easing interest rates. What it wouldn't have captured is what occurred 6 hours prior to that, which was the inflation reading for the last month for the US, which was weaker than market expectations. So the market combined those two events where the Fed signaled that they will look to ease rates later this year, as well as an expectation that the Fed will continue to recalibrate the pace of their declines with the latest piece of information that they wouldn't have had a chance to, being that interest rate cuts are coming and they will start. So that did see shorter term and longer term US rates move a reasonable way lower. That does flow through to a New Zealand interest rate market as well. New Zealand interest rates are benchmarked to US interest rates. New Zealand is a net importer of capital. We compete for foreign investment. Therefore, our interest rate settings need to be competitive on a global basis. If US rates move lower, ours can move lower alongside that, and have done so this morning. That is therefore providing you an opportunity to be executing your strategy at more favourable rates and levels than what we've seen over the past month.
Excellent, thank you. For those of you who are borrowing, for those of you who are investing, probably not quite such a good story. Councillor Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Alex. Just 2 points of clarification for me, please. So we've held off on these swaps of 15 million because essentially you were waiting for these reports, the likes of the Federal Reserve report today, or you were noting that there was a lot of volatility in the market with the potential for rates to go downwards, which would be more favourable for us. Is that correct?
That is correct. And over the past month, I guess maybe to give you a sort of round trip here, interest rates have probably moved top to bottom in the last 4 weeks around 35 basis points. So it's fairly substantive kind of moves. Given that you have an objective to create some certainty and you're looking to avoid that sort of volatility, taking a $15 million position in and amongst that sort of level of noise was not advisable.
So the second point, and that might be just a step too far with conjecture, is this a forerunner to things that we might hear from our own Reserve Bank in terms of retail rates?
Okay, there's some interesting dynamics sort of playing out here, and I guess the US experience is a good one in terms of seeing what we might be facing into as well. So the US saw their peak inflation rate just above 9%. 12 months ago, they had managed to bring that rate down into the 3% range. It continues 12 months later to be in a 3% range. They're targeting 2%, much like we are from an inflation basis. The core inflation pressure has proved to be incredibly sticky and difficult for the central bank to move lower. And hence the timing and level of interest rate cuts has continued to get pushed out and less cuts likely. New Zealand's facing something very similar. So whilst we have a headline inflation rate that reads 4%, that's still 2% above where the Reserve Bank would ideally like it to be. They're again targeting a 2% outcome. But it's the subcomponents of that 4% that are quite telling. The non-tradable component, the core inflation component, is the piece the Reserve Bank should be able to influence. This is your food prices, rates, utilities, energy, insurances. A number of those items are continuing to show substantive year-on-year increases in prices, such that we're seeing the core non-tradable inflation well above 5%. What's brought the headline rate down to 4% at the moment is what's called tradable inflation, being the price of imported goods and services. Think the price of oil, think imported TVs, bikes from China, things that our Reserve Bank has no influence over the price over. That is doing a lot of the heavy lifting for us in terms of getting inflation back to target, but we don't control that. So the Reserve Bank this is something that persisted for the past decade, but it's likely to persist, and the Reserve Bank are likely to find themselves in a similar situation going forward, which is core inflation running above 3% and looking for the tradable component of inflation to drag the overall headline into their 1 to 3% target band.
Okay, thanks. That's good.
Any other questions of Alex? I've got a couple. Alex, if you think of Adrian Orr's little statement that he made a wee while ago about he wants rents, insurance and rates to be those people to reduce it, when often interest rates are actually one of the drivers behind those underliers, right? So he's asking he's putting interest rates up or holding them up, but he's then asking the people who receive those interest rates to cut their expenditure. You got any comments about, because I found some of his statements quite confusing at his last announcement. Do you want to comment on that and what it actually means for our short-term interest rates?
Look, what that means in the way the US is a reasonably blunt instrument. can move it up and down, and the reality is it tends to affect only one side of the inflation equation, that being the demand side of the equation. So put rates higher and make affordability a challenge. And that's where Adrian's going with the strategy, and the Reserve Bank are going with the present strategy. Increase rates, put pressure on households and their ability to meet those price increases. So whilst insurance companies are seeing their reinsurance costs offshore skyrocket and looking to pass that on, whilst the level of asset renewals required, the construction costs associated with that are leading, as you well know, to increases in local government rates, whilst energy companies have catch up to do in terms of their CapEx programs and renewals programs and looking to pass that on. They're looking at a point where the consumer cannot pay or meet that price increase, and that will therefore need to be absorbed by the producer or the supplier. So yes, interest rates are a driver of some of those factors moving higher. It is realistically the only instrument that the Reserve Bank has to try to combat inflation.
Right. So while we're seeing long-term interest rates coming down, what's your crystal ball showing you in terms of short-term? I see ANZ they expect it to be reducing early next year. What's your crystal ball? And I know we shouldn't be looking at crystal balls, but it's just useful information to squirrel away, right? As part of our comparison.
Look, and look, this is a discussion I've been having with council management, and this isn't less crystal ball gazing, and there is some science behind this. The Reserve Bank have recently released an update to what they project as the neutral rate for the OCR. So were the economy to be running not too hot, not too cold, inflation is at target, there's economic growth, they would have indicated that they would be holding the OCR at 3.9%. What that implies and means for council in terms of borrowing cost is probably around a 4% level over the medium term is where we can expect rates to be averaging. So it's not to say that they don't necessarily move below that, but that they will average over the medium term around that 4% level. Medium term's also not defined, but it's likely somewhere between a 3 to 5 year time horizon.
Sure.
The current wholesale interest rate market, as mentioned earlier, prices in these forward expectations of where rates are moving. The current 5-year swap rate, after today's movements, is just below 4.5%, meaning that the market and financial markets are already pricing in almost all of the decline over the next 5 years to that neutral rate and level. The inference being there's not a lot more expectation we should necessarily have for interest rates to move materially lower from what is currently being priced by financial markets. Maybe another 0.5%.
In the 5 year bracket, in that medium term bracket.
That's right.
Okay. All right. That's useful. I think that's really useful for council in terms of its long-term planning. Right? I know I'm getting into management here, but I used to do this, so right. All right.
So we talked about these rates last time we had a meeting with the way to jump, right?
Well, that's me, and we were a risk committee, right? So getting the interest rates roughly right, because you'll never get it exactly right, otherwise you're playing the market, which is speculation, right? Is actually a critical part of doing your long-term plan and your good decision making. Councillor Nash.
Thank you. It's Ash, Chair. This is a good news. All I'm saying, shall we be, and that's probably related to Sue, factoring in this rate of under 4% in our LTP calculations to make it more realistic. Thank you.
Yeah. So we will, at the moment in our LTP, I think we've used a higher amount, probably 6%. So we'll be looking at, that's one of the questions I've put to our accountant who's working on the LTP, is that one of the things we can also lower our budget. And so I'll get him to work with Julia and Alex to work out what we should be using.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
But can I just clarify, that's likely to be in the second, years 3, 4 and 5 rather than years 1 and 2. So it's not likely to give any rate relief for this coming year. It will be in subsequent years. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Alex, for some good news. Come again next time if you like and give us some even better news.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Alex. Any other questions? No. Any other questions? Thank you. So we've got a recommendation there that the committee notes the Treasury report for April 24. Can I have a mover?
Yep.
I'm happy to move.
Seconded.
Ash.
Councillor
No,
Naya. Thank you, Councillor Ash. All those in favour, please say aye. Ash.
Aye.
Not Nash. Sorry, I'm trying to.
Take the N off, please.
Go.
New name.
New name. I know, I'm good at that. Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's not about it.
Right. So we now move to the quarterly debtors report, page 23 to 29, item 4.3.
Lani.
Lani's online.
Coming in, just one moment. Oh, she's dropped off. Wait a second, she was there. I'll just
She was there.
come back on, just one moment.
Come in, Lani.
Yes.
Debtors, yes. Oh, there she is.
Hi, sorry.
Nice to see you, Lani. Thank you.
Thank you. I take the report as being read, and I've just got a few notes here to go through in regards to land rates debt. So just a note that it is arrears prior to the 1st of July 2023. So during the year, we have reduced the debt by 1.5 million. It is good to see that these figures, they're not increasing because we also have a rates increase each year. So it is good to see the figures aren't increasing. We currently have 3 postponed accounts. They're worth about 32,000. So what happens with postponed accounts is basically we set aside the debt and the ratepayer or the customer starts paying the current. So it just stops penalties accruing, and it's probably one of the only options that we do have to assist those who are struggling, particularly if they've themselves get into debt. We're also seeing people coming through with postponements that don't have house insurance, which does make the process more difficult as well. So people are struggling out there to afford the basics. We've still got a couple of complex mortgage demands that we're working through that have arrears. We've had good contact with Māori freehold landowners, and we continue to work through complexity for those accounts for the rating and also the debt. So we've got approximately $1.5 million in debt there, and we don't have ownership contact details. Just a note here about the hardship that we're seeing coming through on the current rate. So this isn't rates that are in arrears, but we're seeing more people struggling to pay their current rate. So that's kind of something that we need to watch out for in the next year. And we've also seen a decrease in direct debits, and this is because people are removing them because they can't afford them anymore, or they're dishonouring all the time and they're being removed. So that's something happening in that space. In regards to debtors, we're still trying to follow up this debt as quickly as we can. And we've seen a number of aged payment arrangements come to an end in the last couple of months, so that's positive. And we are seeing hardship in the food licensing space, so people struggling to pay their fees. There was a question about the resource consents over 90 days, and I'll just provide a breakdown of that. So 5 accounts worth 24K debt collection. We've got 1 account worth 7K that's a potential write-off. 13 accounts with 93K are sitting in the objection space, and 4 accounts with 26K on payment arrangements. That's about all I have. We're also seeing, and we will see, increased debt in the allodial space, people refusing to pay rates for their own reasons, basically. And yeah, that's all at the moment.
Thank you, Lani. Councillor Ash. Oh, we just lost your video feed. No, we've lost him.
Oh dear.
Ash.
Through the chair, I'll just add to what Lani's saying about the hardship and needing some guidance with council because of the fact that we've now got people are not having insurance on their homes. And it means that, you know, the postponement means we basically just put a lien on their land and home, but also the bank's got that. So that we may not end up with anything in the end, and whether that's taking too big risks if we're, you know, we've just currently got 2 people who are wanting postponements now that don't have insurance. So, yeah, because people, it's really hard out there. They're having to make really difficult decisions.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I thought rates had priority over even mortgages because you can't, if the bank does a mortgagee sale, the rates are still stay with the landowner. So the council, providing the rates are actually valid and we've got an appropriate charge over it, we've got priority.
I believe that's correct because you can't transfer a property without clearing the rates.
Well, yeah, the new owner won't accept it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
so
discounted accordingly. Yeah.
yeah, through the chair, we have to secure the debt, we have to go through the legal judgment process or the postponement process. So the option for, if we can't do a postponement, the only other option is to go and secure it through legal action, through a judgment, so that we get that money. Does that make sense? So the ones that we've got on postponement at the moment, they all don't have mortgages. Yeah.
Yeah. The issue, right? So, right, I'm not a lawyer, heck. So, sorry, I don't want to give legal advice. That's the last. The question I have, if we don't get a statutory land charge again, you know, a charge against the land, but we actually have a postponement. Now, my understanding, if you have postponed the rates, the 6-year, if you postpone the rates in accordance with your postponement policy, your rates are not subject to the 6-year write-off. So they will still actually stay, the rates will still stay with the land. That's my understandings.
Yeah, that's correct.
Correct.
That's correct.
So to me is my recommendation would be that to actually making sure we've got a really robust postponement policy to ensure that we've actually postponed those rates as part of that policy, and therefore we're actually protecting. While we're not getting the cash at the moment, ultimately someone will actually pay, whether it's in 5 years or 6 years' time. We will get the cash. Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
We'll have a look at that.
Yeah, but my caution is, right, my recommendation from a risk perspective, I would only be postponing the rates if they're not insured up to the percentage of the land value, because if the property was to suffer a catastrophic event such as a fire and they had no insurance, then basically all you're going to get is the land value less the demolishing costs of what's left. Yep. So that's something that I would be suggesting as part, can be considered as part of that policy.
Thanks. That's good
Okay.
advice.
Okay. Councillor Ash, you're back online. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Somebody threw me out, so I'm back. Thank you. Lani, just a quick question. I don't know whether somebody asked in my absence for 2 minutes. Is there's abandoned land sale? You said you're progressing it. Is it listed with the agents? Is it we are seeing this money next week or 2 weeks? Abandoned land sales.
Yeah, so the next step is to proceed with abandon.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah, so the next step is to proceed with abandoned land sales. So we haven't proceeded with that at this stage.
Why?
Through the chair, because we haven't got resource and we've just had one person less, so that's something that's just on the,
Okay.
sitting on the fence.
Alright.
And it's not a basic process either.
No, okay, yeah, I was actually going to say, I think for councillors, right, that if you go down the rating sale, it's actually, I think as Councillor Aaron has already alluded to, it's not a straightforward process. It can actually take up to 12 to 18 months, the time you actually go through the process of actually council decides, and I understand that it's often a council decision, it can't necessarily, right, unless it's specifically delegated. So council has got to approve the rating sale, and then it's got to go through quite a judicial review process before you can actually put the property up for auction.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Lani. Look, I've got a couple of queries coming from that. I'm interested to get an understanding of what you're seeing as a percentage or numbers, the level of increase in queries and on hardship, etc. That's the first question. The second one comes back to the point I raised about the RCs and being over 90 days, and you got $140,000 that is not collectible at this stage. At what stage do we issue a resource consent? I'm presuming, no matter the circumstances, that they don't get issued until there is a final settlement on the amount outstanding. That would be clear. But I also understood that some of these people may just abandon their resource consent and then come back and apply for a new one. So are we tracking that, or is that in fact a reality? Sorry, 3 questions there.
So for the resource consents, I did split out where they're sitting. So we do have 24K with debt collection. So once they get to that point, I mean, 'cause some of the resource consents, it's not just for a subdivision, it might be for land use.
Yep.
If it's for a subdivision, they do have to pay those charges when they get 224. So that kind of helps in that respect. So, and the rest are objections. So so that's sitting with council staff to resolve.
Yeah.
Is that?
That's really what that was, yeah. The first one was what sort of, it gives an indication of the level of increase regarding hardships you'll see.
Yeah, at this point, it's mainly to do with the current debt, so not debt sitting in this report. It was just when we send out our communication, we are getting more people coming through saying that they can't pay. I mean, they've got lots of different increases in different areas for people, and as time goes on and interest rates increase, people will find it more difficult. So that might be something that we can start looking at in the next couple of reports and just keep a track of. If they've got mortgages, they'll obviously go through the mortgagee demand process and we'll collect funds that way, and most of them likely will have mortgages. So we do collect funds that way. It just means that we can offer payment arrangements and we can offer advice, but there's not a lot more we can do for people who owe rates.
Yep, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I've got one last one. It's on page 26 of the agenda, page 4 of your report. The issue is in the second last paragraph, right? Customers are often paying land rates but not water rates. Can you just elaborate a little bit what you're doing about those water rates? Because are these water rates under Section 19 of the Rating Act, and therefore they are legally rates? Or are they actually invoiced? Yep.
Sorry, through the chair.
Are they actually? Yep. Sorry. Yep.
They are a rate, and they do get picked up in our mortgagee demand process if they haven't paid them. We have the ability to put direct debits on our land rates in a weekly, fortnightly or monthly basis. We don't have the same option for water rates because they're variable year to year, and we can try and give people options to pay them more regularly, but we don't put a direct debit on for that fact. I mean, we are always up against mail not being delivered, people not seeing it, not opening it, people not being able to afford to pay it. We do have, so what we have achieved in this space is we're sending monthly reminders when we put penalties on water accounts to say, hey, you haven't paid. So we are a lot more across that than what we have been previous years. We're doing that regularly, we're calling them, and we are trying to get them to pay.
Okay, thank you. So question probably for Sue, right? I mean, technically, because they're a rate, you can actually add a penalty, but you've actually got to go through the penalty, setting it as part of your rates resolution as to when the penalty would apply for water rates. Do you currently do that?
No,
Yep.
I don't, do we?
Yep, we have a penalty on our rate on water rates, yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
We are only charging 6 monthly.
Yeah, this is twice a year, yeah. Councillor Ash, you got another question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's probably directed to yourself to give an opinion on it. So the penalties KDC is charging and also budgeting it as a revenue source. You think it's a good idea to budget penalties as a revenue source for rest of thing, because it's negatively is something emotionally and practically negative thing to budget penalties. So what's your view on that?
So through the chair, this, we don't actually budget for penalties because a lot of them, we negotiate with customers anyway, that if they start paying a regular amount, we'll remit the penalties. So the amount of penalties we get is, yeah, we made the decision. I think councillor said that to us last time, that they didn't want us to budget for penalties.
Yeah, but I did see it in the financial report, even we will talk later. There is a budget for penalty, and the variance, negative or positive, is related on that. So I don't think it's a good idea to have. Thank you for that. What's your opinion, Chair, on this budget?
Well, the issue is you will always get some amount of penalty, right? Even if, right? Because now my view, this is my personal view, penalties are the stick. The carrot becomes, as Sue has alluded to, is the council decision. If you're on a payment plan or you're making your best efforts, etc., to pay it, then that becomes the carrot to say is the council will waive some of the penalties if you stick to a payment plan. So that's, you know, and in my personal view, if you are behind in your rates, you should be making a contribution to council for the use of their money while you're, right, using them as a bank, right? You know, rates 10% and then 10% compounded is punitive, which is what it's designed to be. So that gives council an opportunity to use the penalties as the stick, and then to say, well, we'll only charge you 2 or 3% on the outstanding amount, so you don't have to go to the bank. Otherwise, when a person doesn't pay and you then as the rates team then do the go to the mortgage holder and they pay, the mortgage holder will certainly add it, right? And probably at a penalty rate because you've actually breached potentially your mortgage by not paying your rates. So to me, you know, penalties are useful, but they need to be used as a carrot and a stick. So therefore, I would be saying is you will always get some penalties, but you shouldn't be budgeting on, we've got $1 million worth of rates outstanding, we're going to have 2 lots of 10%, therefore we should be budgeting to receive 2 lots of 10%, because no, you're not going to. Does that answer your question?
It definitely does, because it has to be implemented as well. And I
Yeah,
think
and
we're
that-
failing
and that's
to
a
do that.
council,
Thank you.
and Sue says that has been debated by council, so that's a discussion you have with council.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions?
One last one.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, sorry. Page 17 of document, sundry debtors arrears ageing, Lani. Just, if you could just clarify, I mean, I'm presuming that we'll see that 30-day factor of what looks like around 1.2 million coming pretty quickly. But can you just explain where you say it's related primarily to government agencies?
Yeah, so often, so what this report shows in the 30-day bucket, it's only just fallen overdue when we run this report, so it might only just be a week overdue. And often we can chase debt, but often we also need to try and look at what's current, that's large, that needs to be paid before the due date, so it doesn't fall overdue, and government departments fall into that. So we bill a range of different departments for different projects, and usually it's paid, it might even be paid, a couple of days after the report's run, but it shows as overdue here. So it's always just trying to, when we deal with government departments, it's trying to get the funds in on the due date. There's usually always delays. So there is no concern there.
Okay.
It's just timing usually.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? So we've got a recommendation there that the committee notes the quarterly debtors report to 30th of April. Can I have a mover? Councillor Mike, do I have a seconder?
I can second it.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Ash. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried.
Thank you.
Item 4.4. Thank you. Jesse, back to the table. Right, annual report. External reporting and
Through the chair, we also have Ethan.
Ethan online. Yeah, thank you. Welcome, Ethan. Is he there yet? Welcome, Ethan.
Hi, morning, councillors.
Morning.
How you doing?
Good. Right. Jesse, if you can just introduce the report. We've got a little bit of background reading there.
Just a small amount. So yes, most of the information for the annual report update is in the attachments.
Yep.
We've got basically the annual report audit commencing, and we're just seeking your input into the audit scope and approving the engagement of Deloitte. Key focus areas, management overrides of controls, sense of expenditure, revaluation of infrastructure assets, legislative compliance, particularly around rating. Our statement of performance is going to be audited a lot differently this year due to the Office of the Auditor General. They're changing the way that they test that, so that's going to be interesting. Recovery from weather events, obviously, still strong focus. Related party transactions and conflicts of interest, severance payments, interestingly, and the Mangawhai wastewater. So basically, happy to take questions, and we've got our Deloitte auditors here as well.
Thank you. And just for clarification, we've actually got in your report, there's actually 5 areas that we're actually asking, right, council to consider. One is the planning letter, one's the proposal letter, the engagement letter, the stock register engagement letter, and the trustee reporting engagement letter, which is quite a handful.
Yes.
And before I just take questions, Ethan, is there anything else you want to add from Deloitte's perspective?
Not really. Basically, the scope of work is pretty, or rather the key areas of audit focus, these are pretty similar to last year. Just also to highlight that we understand that management is in the midst of preparing the unaudited LTP. So as part of our audit review this year, we will have a look at that LTP once that's published, just to see if there's any potential implication to the current year audit.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, council are lucky not having to have their LTP audited. Right? Trust me.
I
Right.
know it's
All right. Councillor Ash, you got a.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question. This letter from Deloitte was sent on 15th of April, which is virtually 2 months before today. And I'm just wondering, they would have done some preliminary finding for our LTP. Had we, why the delay in hiring them?
So through the chair, in answer to Ash, it's not the LTP that they're auditing, it's their annual report, and the annual report isn't completed till the 30th of June. That's our balance date. So Deloitte's moving, I think, next week to do some preliminary work.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping to get before the final decision of LTP. That's they have mentioned strategically that is quite important to look at those areas before 31st of July. So literally we have very, very little time. That's what I was thinking. If the letter came and it could have been presented in the council meeting or briefing much before, isn't it?
So through the chair, that this normally goes to audit, risk and finance. So that's why we've this particular interest to the audit, risk and finance committee.
Yeah, I've got a quick question on that, right? Either Jesse or Sue, right? We've got some people who should be signing it. Have they already been signed? Has it been signed already or not?
No.
Not signing it until after.
Okay,
Proofs.
thank you.
We do plan to bring those letters earlier in the year next year.
Yeah.
So to the March meeting.
And I think to be fair on Deloitte, right? There was some considerable delay in the Office of the Auditor General approving the engagements because of the confusion around the LTP, right? So just because you didn't have your LTP audited doesn't mean that Deloitte can move straight into the engagement letter, right? As Jesse has said, the OAG are actually not the standard setter, the accounting standards board of the accounting setter, but the way the audit is undertaken is at the direction of OAG. They were focusing on LTPs, getting that out of the way, and no LTP engagement letters were actually sent to any client until the amendment to the Water Services Bill was actually passed, because that actually changed the audit of the LTP. So there was a whole lot of backlog from OAG. So yes, in theory, it would be nice, right? Ethan, if you can next year, get it in time for our earlier meeting would be appreciated, but we know you're under constraint.
Yeah, 100%. I fully agree. We should get the engagement letters and the planning back across to the council in the March meeting, hopefully next year.
Yeah, that would, yeah.
So sorry, just a clarification, Chair, on this.
Yeah.
Whatever has happened is happened, but let's say theoretically their findings are that considering their findings, we have to rework our presumptions on LTP, like especially Mangawhai wastewater schemes and all, which is a crucial part of the reference. How would we do that?
So through the chair, what the auditors are looking at is really the capacity of the plant, and have we provided for that? Because at the last LTP, that was one of their questions, that there didn't seem to be the program. And I'm not sure that you were here, Councillor Naya, but it was probably within the last council, we had a number of community meetings with specific people in the community about the Mangawhai wastewater scheme, came out with a plan, and then subsequent to that, our General Manager Infrastructure has come in and he's found some efficiencies he can make to that and come forward with a supplementary plan, which some of it's been implemented. So all that Deloitte is looking at is, have we made sure we've got enough capacity in the plant for all these plan changes that are coming on board? And that's what we're looking at proving.
Thank you.
It won't change our annual report.
Thank you. So hopefully that same mistake will not be repeated this time in the capacity calculations, right?
So there's no mistake in capacity calculations. It's, what was happening was that potentially at the last LTP, there wasn't sufficient in the long-term plan to cover projects. Yeah, to cover costs. That was really what it was looking at. So infrastructure have done a much better job this time and got a number, obviously, have come to you with updated costs.
Thank you.
In the LTP.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other questions on this? Wow, I've got a question, right, for the committee. This is your opportunity, right, to ask Deloitte, is there any areas of concern you want them to look at as part of their annual report, on the basis that if you do, right, there will be, that they will do it, right?
Yeah.
Providing the committee agree, but also they will have to adjust their fee accordingly, right? There's no such thing as a free lunch, right? All right? So, but, you know, so if you've got some concerns about the annual report and the reporting, now's the time to speak up, right? It's not the end of the world, but this is an opportunity to say, and I have had it where there have been some concerns raised in other councils where they had concerns over some issues that then reflected in the annual report, and the auditors were able to look at it. It's not normal, but I think it's an opportunity to have that discussion with the auditors.
Yeah.
So I did not hear anything. All right. So thanks, Ethan. We've got a recommendation here that we approves the engagement of Deloitte's, right? Now, do we actually, I mean, that then just is implied that then the mayor and chief executive are then right authorised, or whatever the right word. Does that need to go in the resolution, Sue, or is that just a given?
I think
It's a given? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Right. So normally, Mayor Craig will also sign these as well, as responsible for governance.
Circulate them for signing.
Thank you. Okay. All right. We're seeing them, Mayor Craig, and we have approved them. All right. All right. So do I have a mover for the recommendation, please? I'll move. Do I have a seconder?
I can second. Thank you.
I think I saw Councillor Aaron's hand go up slightly before you said anything. Councillor Ash, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
It's carried. Nick, thank you, Ethan. Nice to see you. We look forward to seeing you giving your feedback in due course.
Will do. See you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. See you.
Thanks, Ethan.
Next item is Sue, 4.5, page 97. Sue in person, regulatory compliance update.
Yes, so this is just a normal quarterly update. The key things I think you want to note is the first thing about we're not complying with our procurement policy. What we do have at the moment is BDO as auditors are doing an audit on procurement, and they'll come up with some advice, but it's because of the fact that there still are staff shortages in the engineering area, not in the building consent area or planning area, but still in engineering primarily. But apart from that, you can see building consents are well down. They're starting to come back up. I think it's last month. Resource consents not quite as far down and still really busy because they're quite complex. And throughout the report, there are lots of issues, but there's nothing insurmountable, and we're doing things about them. And we've noted that where consents are due to expire, that we have applied for them. I'll just take questions, and some of them I may or may not know because they're not my area.
Okay. Any, Councillor Aaron?
I just wanted to clarify on the Kaihu raw water, that we've finished delivering water.
I understand and that will be deleted next month.
Next report.
Yeah, next report.
Okay.
Yep.
It's taken a long time.
Okay. Okay. Interestingly, you too have a wharf that's got some structural issues. I could show you a photo of one I took while I was on holiday, which I thought had some structural issues, but hasn't been closed yet.
In Kaipara?
Not in Kaipara.
Not Kaipara.
No. Another jurisdiction. So wharves are, right?
Big focus.
Well, no, they're actually something that sort of bubbles. Salt water is never good for anything. Any other questions? No. So can I have a mover for the recommendation, please? Councillor Aaron. Councillor Ash, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Next item, our policies bylaw update, 4.6, page 103.
Through the chair, I'm just letting in Shireen and
Shireen.
Virginia, who will be taking over the report.
Right. So who's taking over the report?
Oh, Virginia Smith,
Virginia, okay.
but Shireen is here today.
Oh, Shireen is here. Oh, and Virginia, right. Welcome.
Morena.
Take your report as read. Are there any key highlights or further information you want to bring to the committee's attention?
Yes, just to advise the committee that apologies, ara mai, there are a couple of errors in the report. The Class 4 gambling venue policy and the TAB policy in Table 1, the review of those policies has actually commenced. Those are underway. And just to let you know that the Citizens Award Policy, Environmental Awards Policy and Community Assistance Policy are scheduled to be presented at an August meeting. So they are in train as well. So just a couple of notifications about amendments to Table 1. The road naming policy is also in train as well. So apologies that there was an error in the table that I inserted in that report. So it's not correctly updated. Apologies for that.
Thank you. Any questions? Comment? No? I've just got one really quick one. It's probably for Sue. You mentioned that BDO are doing review of the procurement. Yes. So potentially that could, well, the procurement policy is not due till 2025. That could actually be brought forward, a review of that policy, depending on the outcomes.
Yes, there could be some
recommendations. And that, well, 2025 is only next year, so no?
Yes.
We could start that a little bit earlier. Okay. No other questions? Okay. Do I have a mover for the recommendations?
Yep.
Mayor Craig, seconded Councillor Mike. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Next item, 4.7, page 105, health, safety and wellbeing update. Welcome. Thanks. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Take your report as read.
Absolutely.
Are there any key highlights that you want or further information you want to bring to the committee's attention?
I think that for this quarter, from the 1st of January, 31st of March, our internal reporting was low. I think that's reflective of the fact that people are on summer break. But you also would have seen that there were 3 fatalities during this period. 2 fatalities were from a rally that was held in Arcadia Road in Paparoa. The organisers of that rally are being investigated by WorkSafe and by Motorsport New Zealand. We've done an internal review of our part. Our part has nothing to do with the event itself, but we do have a duty of care prior to an event taking place, either using KDC assets or on KDC land. We've reviewed that and we've in fact come out with some recommendations. We have certainly done all that is reasonable. So we do have a relationship with an event organiser to make sure if there's any known hazards that KDC is aware of, that we inform the event organiser before they have their event. And obviously once the event is taking place, that sits within the realm of the event organiser. But last year, what we did is that we created a form so that we now do a health and safety evaluation of all events that we are made aware of. And that's often through the channel of our community liaison team. And so we just make sure that who's ever having an event in our district has the right sorts of health and safety skills and knowledge and expertise to be able to run that event safely. So we can definitely demonstrate that we did all that was reasonable with regards to the Arcadia Rally event. But one of the things that we have identified is there does need to be a tighter communication between the CAR team, so the teams that are making the decisions and putting the information to council about potential road closures, and also around our roading network team that go out and do inspections of roads. And they typically do that with rallies because, of course, the rally, you know, you're going very fast on unsealed roads and they could potentially make quite a bit of damage to the road. So we're always making sure that the road is in a suitable condition, both prior and post. But of course, we just need to make sure that's done in a really timely way, just in case there's been a weather event, there has been changes to the road that we're unaware of, that we've got roading teams in the area that they have to suddenly graded the road and we're not aware of. So we're just making sure that that process is made tighter. And as a result of the Arcadia Road incident, we've actually refined our health and safety evaluation form. And I'm currently working with the event organisers who are about to run another rally in Dargaville in July, early July. So I'm working very closely with the event organisers there. Again, really just looking at their health and safety management. What plans have they got in place? What are they thinking about? How have they modified their practices as a result of this previous incident? So we're working really closely with them to make sure that we've got really good alignment. And on the other side, unfortunately, a Ventia contractor was killed during work in the road corridor. Again, the incident itself sits with Ventia, and what we're looking at and doing a review, and we're still in the process of doing that, is making sure that our shared PCBU duties have been well executed. And obviously there's a lot of data because that contract goes back over a period of time. So we're really just making sure that we can evidence, if WorkSafe ask of KDC, can we evidence really good practice?
Thank you for that.
Problem.
Any questions, comments? But, yeah, I mean, I know a little bit about the guy whose service son was involved in a motorsport accident, and he was suitably impressed. He wasn't injured, but his co-driver was, right? How quickly the motorsport response was, and the subsequent investigation, how thorough it was, right? But they've actually got GPS trackers in the cars, so if there's a major G-force event, the organisers knew straight away that the person had gone off the road. So,
and one of the initial learnings that have come from the event organisers with this particular rally is that they're now looking at implementing something that they use with Coast Guard in their little planes, so having a bottle of oxygen that can be strapped securely to the seat, because one of the issues for this particular one is that the car entered a body of water, and people were on their safety advisors were on the scene very, very quickly.
Yep.
But of course, you know, you've got a body of water, so they've already got learnings that have come from it. And of course, if WorkSafe were wanting to look at any involvement of KDC, we need to make sure that we have all of that information that of our part of our duties, you know, is in a position so it's very clear and easy for them to see what we've done. And I feel really confident that particularly with that Arcadia one, that our processes are really strong.
yeah. Councillor Ash, you've got a question?
Sorry, now you can hear me. Sorry. So it's more than a comment or question or maybe an opinion. Is that no one is happy about that incident in which that person died in the rally. But my comment is more related to the state of our roads. Everybody knows about potholes and all. And do as a council, we have any responsibility, moral, legal or financial, when these rallies drivers get into such situations? I know it is something under investigation, but we have instances of people breaking their sumps on those potholes and whatnot. I'm just asking you, Philip, as you are an experienced person, does council has any obligation whatsoever in approving when the state of roads is not so good?
I'd leave that to the expert at the other table, but my understanding is the Local Government Act 1974, and there's still parts of the 74 Act that are still around, says basically that the council doesn't have an obligation in terms of its roading to adhere, have a perfect roading network. They understand that, and therefore it's only if there are significant issues that we've known about that we could have rectified that we didn't, then council would actually be liable. But just because a pothole appears and someone hits that pothole and bounces off the road and has an accident, council isn't liable, because we can't be expected to know about every defect in the road. But had we known about a slip for a week and hadn't done something about it and someone ran into the slip, that would be a different situation. That's my understanding. Is that your understanding too?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then with regards, if it was just specific to this to a rally, the rally organisers go and scope the roads.
Correct.
They are looking for particular types of roads that will challenge their drivers. So they are looking for ones that, potentially the rest of us don't necessarily want to, go at high speed on. And they source those roads, they check those roads for specific, conditions. And our duty of care is if anything should change, and the time that they have said to us, we would like to have these roads closed. If we know then that something has changed, we have a duty of care to advise them.
If we know, yes, or we should have known.
That's right. What is reasonable?
Correct.
That's right.
Thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Aaron.
Thank you. Thanks for your report. Just a question about the library incidents. I haven't noticed previously so much activity. Is that a concern? Do we need to be looking at?
I've just worked with the library and I'll capture it in the next quarter's report. Certainly there is quite a bit of community noise at the moment. Libraries all around New Zealand are having what are called rainbow events or, pride events. And there certainly has been some chatter and some increase in noise from the community. And our library team have worked through this. They've looked at, are the events that they're holding, are they reasonable? Are they suitable? Are they reflective of the community? Are they reflective of good practice? And we've started to look at, well, what's the risk profile? What's the risk appetite? And what controls can be put in place? I think that if you're looking at Dargaville Library, it's a real hub of the community. And so people are there and around. What I would say about our library staff is they're really inclusive, and they have managed those incidents really well to make sure that where there has been an incident, it hasn't spilled over to other customers. They've often been not aware of it, and the team themselves have really managed the emotive component of it, and again, followed really good practice. So I think it's just an indicative of kind of the noise that's happening in our community.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, any further questions? All right, I have a mover then for the recommendation that we note the health, safety and wellbeing update from 1 January to 31st of March 24. Councillor Aaron, do I have a seconder? Councillor Ron. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Carried, and we'll take a 5-minute recess. Adjourn for 5 minutes. Have a
I can't hear. Chair, are we back? You guys are on mute.
Sorry, Councillor Nair.
Wait for the mayor.
Right, we're still adjourned. It's starting soon.
Let's reconvene. And our next item is 4.8, page 113, our legislative compliance awareness of obligations. Thank you, Sue.
So thank you, Chair. So what this is about is just we get all our team managers and T3, T4 managers and group managers to sign just a sheet saying, have they complied? The only one with legislation, the only one we got back that didn't was and it would be quite normal, it's an infrastructure where they're obviously looking at things that don't comply with their wastewater plants, but always they'll be working with NRC towards compliance and what they can do. So that's the only issue. And the other part, A, was the legislative changes, which were quite great with the turnaround in the water legislation.
Right.
So who's asked for some of this?
All our management team.
All your management team?
Yeah, team managers, group managers and team managers.
So that they're aware of all the.
So they understand, are there any instances that they know we might be defaulting on? Just to capture, because sometimes if you don't ask the questions, you don't get the right answers.
Okay, thanks for that, Sue. Questions, Councillor Aaron?
Just a clarification, under the changes for the local government information and meetings and Act. Just said Lagoima. The limb requests issued under Lagoima, so that's not just an ordinary limb? Is that?
No, I think it's just an ordinary limb, but it happens to be Lagoima for some.
My understanding is that a limb is actually under Lagoima. Right. It's about all information that council has, but it's about that specific, right?
Yeah, right, okay.
Yeah, it's my understanding.
Something new every day.
Yeah, yep.
So my follow-up question then is that, because the change is that we now need to include information in regards to the effects of property. So where would that information come from?
So that would be the NRC information where it says where the levels are on your property. But it's not council information.
Yeah, having been on the receiving end of legal challenges about limbs, right? It's about information that the council holds, and the council's got to hold that information. Yeah, and our good friends NZTA were very naughty. They gave us some information that we didn't realise applied to properties, and we never put it on the property files, but they gave it to us.
Right.
So they actually diverted. We became their agents.
Yeah.
Reported very nicely. Thank you very much. All right. So that Lagoima, in my opinion, is a significant risk council in terms of non-compliance because it's about that information that council holds. Ooh. And how easy is that connection? That to me is actually a significant risk.
Yeah.
And of course, then we've got our good old ombudsman who then is setting his own standards for what he believes is confidential items. And I'll leave it at that.
So just to give you confidence, we have with our LIMS, they don't, one person doesn't just provide the LIMS, it goes to the building specialist, to the rating specialist, to the planning specialist, and then all brought together under one department.
Wow.
Yep. Right, okay. Any questions on this one?
Look, I mean, Mr. Chair, it's subsidiary, I guess, but just to your point on the Lagoima, does somebody have to actually highlight that they're making a Lagoima request, or does it come about just through a letter or an email to council asking information?
So no, people just ask for a LIM as a property information, but legally it's under the government.
Yeah. So a LIM is under Lagoima, all right? But the issue is, you've got to be careful, because technically people don't actually have to ask for it, don't have to mention the words Lagoima. They just say, can you provide all your information on this, right? But if you get the taxpayer unions, they always say under. They get the act wrong sometimes. I've actually seen that, but that's because I've just copied and pasted it from requests from the government. They talk about the Official Information Act rather than anyway. But technically, you still got to, right? And if you don't comply, the ombudsman, it can be pretty tough. All right. Yep. Thank you for that. Any other questions? So can I have a mover for the recommendation? Yep. Thank you, Mayor Craig, seconded. Yep. Councillor Mike, all those in favour, please say aye. 4.9, our resolutions of past audit recommendations. Thank you, Sue. Page 125 onwards.
Yeah, so many of these are still outstanding. As I think we mentioned last quarter, roading, NT18, the resourcing there is challenging. We still haven't got an asset manager, haven't had one for roading for the last 4 months. Really difficult to get people involved with roading to work for us. And it has implications for obviously our financial audit at the end of the year, and also for them progressing some of the improvements that have been captured in some of the audits that have come about. One of the things I can report on is review of community loans. We've updated the Treasury policy. However, the Mangawhai Museum, the target rate wasn't approved for them this year. I've still got to work through with them what happens with their loan, but it's likely we'll just say that they have to pay interest until we sort it out the following year.
Okay. Any comments, questions on this report?
Just on that one, they have been paying interest, or did they stop paying interest?
So yes, they have been paying interest. They've always been paying interest. But the issue for them this year is that the interest rate will be a lot higher.
Yeah.
They may not be able to afford that.
Councillor Ash?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment. I mean, everywhere they're talking about joblessness and people leaving and over the shore, offshore to Australia in hordes. And here our council suffering, or in spite of best efforts, not able to recruit the core staff. Would you think, I mean, just a comment, is it a good idea to then merge council so we can have not have so much staff needed and they can work for a joint? What's your comment on that? Because since 1.5 years, I've noticed that this inability to keep staff or hire staff has been a challenge for Kaipara. So would you have any opinion or comment on that, Mr. Chair?
Me?
Yes.
You're asking me for my opinion?
Yes.
I think that's beyond my scope as chair. Look, all I would say is, if you look at my chair's report,
Yes.
Every council in the country, irrespective of size, location, is actually struggling to retain or attract appropriately qualified staff across a lot of sectors, right? So amalgamating councils wouldn't necessarily solve that problem.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
My understanding is that that labour market might change slightly with jobs around the country.
I'll talk about that in my report, but I would stress it's appropriately qualified, right? People to do the job that's required, right?
Yep.
I'll expand on that when I get to my report. I don't want to go off piste because I'll keep my powder dry. Thank you. Councillor Erin.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions in regards to the Kaiui Lakes campground. Just the first one is in regards to the booking system. There's a high impact risk there about off-peak season, but I wouldn't have thought that would be high impact because if it's off-peak, there should be plenty of sites available. I don't know. That just, I thought high impact was a bit extreme. But my other question is in regards to the cash on site. Because the only cash that should be left is for the showers. Is that correct?
That's correct, but there still is a lot of cash collected. It's probably still looking in the tens of thousands for the showers.
Right, so
there needs to be either, so it is a concern of finance, but what, and we've talked to the GM Haley, and they're looking at putting this business out so it becomes someone else can manage it.
Right, okay.
At the moment, that's we haven't got anything in our LTP for changing that. Obviously, the rationale I understand is because there's a water shortage out there and they want people to pay if you're going to have a shower.
That's not an issue. I mean, it's just this has been on our report here for some time, and I just sort of thought a token system would have been implemented by now, but
no, it hasn't.
To try and reduce that, but now, yeah, like you say, now we're going out to market. Maybe that'll be someone else.
I'm hoping it gets solved that way, or else that the minute that we do something, and put it in as a capital item.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments? So we've got a few dates that seem to be quite broad, right? And I hear about Kaiui Lakes at sort of 24, 25. So, you know, but some of them are a little bit vague. So maybe can we just look, I hear you about your NTA issues, right? But maybe next time can we just tighten up some of the dates? But I'm really keen to understand on page 139, the biological forestry assets unable to complete and what that actually means. I mean, I think it's a low risk, but do we actually say as a committee, we agree with you and it's too hard, and we make a recommendation that we concur it's too hard and it comes off the list? Right down the very bottom.
Okay, is it a Deloitte one? Okay.
Yep, Deloitte 1.7. Yep.
Yes. Look, we own very little now. We sold most of them. I think it's only one very small plots. So, and I think, yeah, it's.
And they're on Maryland.
Yeah.
Maryland. So
look, my suggestion is, because I've been there, done this before with other councils, where council agrees that the risk is low, that the beneficial is low, that we actually say we're not going to spend any more time on it. We collectively as governors support you on that, and it comes off the list rather than you actually having to. And then Deloitte see that, and they're happy. Okay.
that'd be good.
All right. Yep. So that's yeah, and I think just some of these have been around for a while. We've been sort of, look, I know resources are problematic. Maybe we just do a bit of a a review, do a review and to say, look, we've got 4 of these here that we don't think we can actually progress unless we get more resources. We think the risk is low, right? Get them off the list, or we're working towards it, but because of X, Y, and Z, it will be 2028 before we get there, right? I'm not being facetious, right? Because of the low risk. You know, I think we've got to be,
Take pressure off.
yeah.
Yep, okay, thanks.
But if there's something of high risk, then we potentially will want some priority on. I think that's our job.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Any other comments on this report? Okay. Therefore, can I have a mover for the recommendation, please? Councillor Aaron, Councillor.
Through the chair, is the recommendation including that the,
No, I've just given that as advice. Okay, don't need, I think we need further information before we can actually take it off.
Yep.
Okay. Councillor Aaron, Councillor Ron, any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Work program update. Sue in person.
Yeah, this is just, every quarter we give you this to
Yep.
show you what we're doing and whether there's anything extra. And it's to make sure that we're considering everything that should be on the program.
Yep.
Versus other things that you add in. So it's straightforward.
Okay, thank you.
I do have a question here, Mr. Chair. And looking at this, and the meetings are all scheduled that we have in June, September, etc. on quarters. I'm just wondering whether, in looking forward, whether we should move the dates of these meetings so we can get updated quarterly information fed into that next meeting. A la, the September meeting is at the end of a quarter, so we've got no new information. But if we had that in November, we've got all the information from that third quarter or the first quarter of our fiscal year. Now, it may not be entirely relevant, some of the things you might update by month, but I just wonder whether that is a consideration so that we can get, where we are reporting on a quarterly basis, we can get absolutely up to date and be really current, because we're working from behind now.
So through the chair, probably if you were going to, you'd probably move it to the, if this is September, and September's the end of the quarter, it would be in.
November.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So I suggested moving, I wrote down, December becomes February, March becomes May, June becomes August, September becomes November. Just saying.
Yep.
through the chair, we can also look at that when we come to agree the calendar. We can do that in October, I think, bring it forward.
I just raised it, so if everybody thinks that that's, worthy consideration.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, look, don't, right? And I will give Alana some advice, right? First up, best dressed in terms of dates.
Yep.
Okay?
Yeah. Particularly when it comes to you.
Absolutely. There was one council that didn't come back to me and they have to do without me. Right?
No wonder.
They meet on a monthly basis though.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So very happy for that to be considered.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just looking at our next one is actually just hearing that, it's 12th of September.
September.
Yeah. Yeah. Good comment. Anything else on that report? I've got some questions. Poor Jessie, right? We've got risk management and insurance. We've got nothing planned for the next 2 meetings. Do we want to? There's no dots on when you are going to do anything for us on those.
Risk.
Yeah, committee will review the risk management framework. And also insurance will review the annual.
We came to in March around the risks, and it was decided then we'll do a deep dive session in September.
Right.
That's the plan for risks.
Okay.
And then the insurance, I can actually get them to come to the next staff if you'd like.
Is that Aon?
I've also been meeting with other brokers. I guess the constraints on staff at the moment, and my understanding that the insurance is going to be what it's going to be, never mind who we get, that it's not the focus at the moment when we've got other demands. So I think my plan actually for insurance is to do a really good deep dive into it next year for the renewal and team up with the other councils that we group our insurance with, because really what's holding us back from being able to do more in that space is the reconciliation of our assets, just getting our assets more tidier to actually have those conversations. So the focus is first get the assets sorted. We're doing the fixed assets register, computerised, that will enable, you know, a good deep dive into assets to be done, and then we can properly have conversations about it. It's just a little bit cart before the horse if we don't do that first.
I don't disagree, right? I mean, to me, is we need, right? Totally support what you're trying to do, but we just need to know what the plan is, because I'm aware of a couple of other councils that are actually looking at, because their insurance premiums going sky high, are there any interventions that council can make, right? And what's the sort of things that the council needs to consider before they do those interventions? So, you know, everyone says, oh, let's increase our excess. That's a sure way of actually reducing our premium. Well, when they've done the numbers, it actually doesn't make a difference, right? So it's that sort of thing. I mean, obviously, I totally support where you're coming from and getting your assets. And one of the big decisions that a number of councils are making is, do we actually insure all our assets? So there's some assets, if it burns down, we won't actually fully do replacement costs. We'll just do an indemnity value, take a nominal value and spend the cash elsewhere. But that's a long process. And the community,
like to do.
And the community also need to be taken along with it, because they're expecting if their hall that gets used 4 times a year gets burnt down, though, and it's insured, they'll get a brand new hall built straight away.
I think that's exactly what we'd like to do. We'd like to really understand which assets we would like to insure, what's the potential risks, and actually have those conversations. We need to do some more work before we can have those. But I do think there is a bit of an opportunity to get a reduced premium by shifting insurance companies just purely because they want you. But I'm not sure if it's really the right thing to do at this point in time.
Is it worth, right, talking to Aon? I do unfortunately know half of them, right? They're not actually that far in Auckland, some of them, right? So getting them up here to talk to the committee about the process. Right.
So I think we did that last year, had them here last year. And so
last year?
I think next year is probably appropriate.
Yeah, next year? We'll put it on for next year. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I mean, I do think we'll have better assets, but I do want to highlight, we've got a lot in work in progress. We haven't got people in roading that are helping us with taking the assets out of work in progress, so there could be still a lot that aren't fully identified.
Yep. No, that's fine. I just want to know the process. Yep.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, to that, Jesse, you know, you talked about identifying assets, getting all that updated, then discussing or detailing with other councils. So once we get to that stage, acknowledging our size, is it possible that we could offload negotiations or further discussions with options to a bigger or a council with more resource that we had trusted?
Potentially, that's an option and it should be explored. I think we benefit, KDC benefits quite a lot from the insurance arrangement that we have. So Far North District Council gets a lot more of that burden. I think it's beneficial for us as it is, but I would, I'll do
I mean,
something to
acknowledging, you know, our size and our capacity, that's all.
Yep. Okay, totally. Yep, all right, thank you for that. That was the only comment also.
Oh, our IT security, that's.
Yeah.
So IT security, those will be picked up next month by Richard.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, so if we go back to the work program, we're just basically just going to note the work program. I'm comfortable with that. Happy to move.
Move.
Yep. A seconder.
Happy to second.
Oh, I've got 1, 2, 3. I got 4, right? I think, all right. I think we'll go with Councillor Erin by a whisker. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Carried. Right. Next item is a review report. It's called the Chair's Report. Okay. And this is something that I am just bringing to the table for discussion and may lead into our public excluded in terms of now your other risk reporting, but these are generic. They're not actually associated specifically with council. And we've already talked about failure item on page 2 of my 147. We've already talked about already the issue of failure to attract or retain top talent. And what I was referring to that is, look, there are plenty of people out there. We're all hearing about the number of job layoffs in central government in Wellington. But how skilled are those people that are being laid off, and do they have the appropriate skills that would actually be of benefit to local government? Because local government, unfortunately, is a very unusual beast and takes quite some time to get up to speed. But I see that also that's actually about having the right skills, the right skill set, right? Maybe it's the right values and learning on the job, but to me is good people are all, in any economic environment, always challenging to find. But just more so seems to be at the moment. And I think the uncertainty of local government, the uncertainty of Three Waters, what's happened, the amount of change that's happening in the sector is actually making people nervous. Is there anyone want to comment on any emerging risks? I think.
Yeah, I've got one here.
Yeah.
We've got an emerging issue we need to debate. I'd like to table this document here. I'll keep running. Take one. We got enough? Yeah. So these are two email come letters from a resident, Clive Bean, highlighting the unhappiness in the district regarding some of the rate increases and the way QV have applied their their evaluations. So QV obviously have their criteria, which is legally based, but as a council, I think it's a risk because there is that much unhappiness out there with the rate. I think it is a risk to us. We may have to address that in the long term, short term, particularly when the rates come out.
So just to give some clarity to the QV, there were a lot of people that had issues with it, and we actually put it on the deliberations and showed the correspondence between the staff going back to QV, asking them, do they think they got it right? They came back and told us legally they had. Then later on, they changed their decision, revalued properties down, especially with private plan changes, which is and we then said, so what's your opinion now? And they said they were allowed to do that, to change their mind. And that's basically what happened. We gave the option of council at the time to write to the Valuer General, but that wasn't part of the resolution when we did the deliberations. we've also had, yeah.
Okay, can I just go to the end? I mean, if people haven't probably had a chance to read this, right? I'm aware of mass valuations, right? And this is the trouble, that the rating valuation doesn't necessarily mean that every property is going to receive a visit, nor is it actually they're going to sit down and look at the peculiarities of each property. They've got indexes, right? So there is an obligation on the property owner to actually receive that, having received that valuation, to make their own assessment. Do they actually lodge an objection or not? Right? It can't, and also that the Valuer General, the Office of the Valuer General, they go through an extensive audit procedure to make sure that there has been a robust process. And I'm aware of some valuations that the Valuer General has actually rejected and asked at QV to go and do more work. So it's not just a wink, wink, nod, nod. There is actually, the Valuer General does actually go through quite an extensive audit procedure to make sure that the valuations are fairly reflected. That doesn't mean they're going to be 100% accurate, right? It's like our annual report, right? The auditor doesn't actually check every single transaction, right, with our annual report, nor does the Valuer General check every single property, but they look for, make sure the process has been correctly followed and there is actually good underlying data. And I think the issue for the risk, yes, there is a reputational risk, council, right? But the issue is, it's a bit like where we have relied on QV and the Auditor General. The question I have is, what more could have we actually done, right? And I think the issue is the notices were duly sent. The problem I see is often people don't actually understand the implications of their change in revaluation, and they see just another from the council asking for more money. I'll put that in the too hard today. Now there is provision under, I can't remember the section, where the QV can do a retrospective adjustment, but there's got to be extenuating circumstances.
Yeah, I think the risk here is that we've got to be very mindful how we consult the communications we put around it, because you could find that this becomes a big issue for a lot of the ratepayers when it comes to them actually paying.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Philip. Yeah. We know there's a legal position on it that is probably not necessarily a risk to the council. It's just more about what happens when the rates demands go out, and a whole lot of people who didn't engage with the QV process have been told that we're going to have 15 or 11 or 9%, and they end up with 50% increases. They can't differentiate between QV and the council, and to them QV is just an agent of ours, or they are us, or whatever. So I think the way that we need to mitigate that risk is to have some upfront preemptive communication around this. I think that generally we have a letter or some sort goes out with the rates demands, and maybe we have a separate insert that also goes in there from staff explaining exactly how this works, so that there's no misunderstanding. I mean, I have sympathy for people that haven't opened their envelopes of their valuations or didn't realise the implications until after the fact, which is problematic for them, but that happens in busy lives, doesn't it? Probably all fallen victim to process sometimes. I think some of these people have ordinary circumstances where they've had valuations that aren't based on any historical sales data, as would be the norm with valuation, and they've just, oh, well, the land next to you or your land might be rezoned through a private plan change. We don't know that yet, and so they've made this presumption the land value is going to skyrocket. No valuation basis for it. I mean, I know there's supposed to be a whole lot of checks and measures, and these are supposed to have been signed off by the valuer general, but it would appear that in some circumstances, QV have backed down and resolved from the position they originally took. And the implications for some of these ratepayers is that they've ended up having to incur a whole lot of costs trying to defend a position taken by QV that they never should have had to defend in the first place, going and getting their own independent evaluations and all that sort of stuff. During our, you might not be aware of this, Mr. Chair, but during our long-term plan deliberations, we discussed this issue and agreed that outside of that process, that council would write a letter to QV articulating what our position is, not just from a council perspective, but in sort of defence of the reasonableness for our ratepayers. Very hard for the ratepayers each individually to try and put resources towards going up against QV and the the valuer general, whereas we can kind of coordinate a reasonable response to them, setting out the facts and asking for some sort of level of reasonable recompense for those that have been unfairly disadvantaged by valuations that were obviously flawed. So that's a process we do need to go through, but I think we need to front foot things and get ready to go in terms of exactly what we're saying to our ratepayers, those rates demands, so that everyone that gets a rates demand also gets a very clear explanation that sets out what's happened and, you know, what our role is in it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This brings me to raise another valid point during deliberations. I unfortunately didn't attend that meeting, but the ratepayers group also raised that the very fact that the land values are so high, considered 90% jump in some cases, and why don't we use capital value? So there is another indication of, rather than going for the land value, we should use the capital value as other councils do. What's your view on that?
Yeah, shame you missed the meeting, eh?
Yeah, it's in the LTP.
Shame you missed the meeting because that was all discussed.
I mean, the issue is that, right, whether you're on land value or capital value is a political call, trust me, right?
Yeah.
Right, I'll just leave it as that, right? Do you have your hand up, Councillor Aaron?
No.
Oh, Councillor Mike?
But I did, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, but a couple other points on this, and I think that this is for us, it's seeking clarity, and you know, I know I've discussed this with our esteemed GM of Finance, or elements of this, but we have one street here in the Heads that had one sale. Right, and the sale was, you know, a reasonable price, just under 3 million. And with the houses, there's probably, I don't know, 25, 30 houses in the street. The valuation, the capital valuation, land valuation, increased for the street, as best they can estimate, is something in the order of $40 million, or a bit over $1 million per property. But coincidentally, even though some of them are new builds, the improved values of all these places declined. Right? Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist naturally, but you've got to ask the question and challenge. I mean, I think that there's more than just a letter. I think that, to me, it's a very serious challenge on QV and the veracity of their decisions, because it comes back to also making a decision, and it may well be under their protocols, But to make decisions some 9 months out on land that is under a notice of plan change. But with the time that they apply their new category and therefore the valuations is 9 months before any hearing, let alone any decision, seems to be outrageous, is a simple word. And this is what I have when we end up being, and to Councillor Larson's word, we are actually front and centre because it's Kaipara District Council invoice that goes out with the rates on it. So they don't care about QV, it's only us. And so we're having to charge rates on a new valuation that has been applied on a new categorisation from QV that hasn't even been approved. And in some cases hasn't even been heard. So, I mean, I might be too naive and too honest as far as this goes, but to me, there is a bigger picture here in challenging QV, because I just think that we are opening ourselves up to all sorts of challenge. And I know that, Sue will say, no, it's just process. But I have real concerns. This has highlighted some gaps, and yes, it's gone on for years in this process.
Can I just make one comment I've referred to, right? Because I've done, right?
You've done. Yeah.
I've been in the traps. There are, in my opinion, there are issues with the current valuation role, the valuation rules and the Valuation Act, because it's basically old legislation, right? Which worked well in its day. We've also then, because the Valuer General was a requirement, we used to have the valuation department. In the valuation department, back in the bad old days, they did all the valuations. Now it's a competitive price process. QV are required to recover costs and make a profit. We have actually gone on a spiral of the lowest cost because it's been a competitive price process. So QV have to compete against someone else. That is not necessarily ending up in a good outcome for everybody. I would say that generally the QV and Valuer General process works relatively well. However, the problem you have is when you have outliers, when it's a mass appraisal system, because that's what the legislation requires. They actually don't go round, nor are they required to go round and value every individual property. They do it on, here is this type of property, and look, I fully understand that QV are under-resourced, right? We're talking about us with old grey hair. We're the guys who used to do it. There is an acute shortage of people who actually understand mass appraisal. Now, Sue, I'm sure you want to comment on this.
Yeah, all I'd say is, we're talking about reputation here, and the staff myself, were fully aware of the implications as soon as the complaints came in. We got hold of QV. We did our best to try and get them to justify. And then when they changed their mind and revalued properties down, we made sure, had they looked at all properties, even those that hadn't written in and made an objection that were in the same group, they said to us they had. And we also asked them about what were we to tell people, because they changed their, they came back, and I put that in front. So we've done our best.
Yep.
We can't influence their process. They've got a process.
No, that's not our.
But I also think in terms of when you're looking at reputation, it's not only in our rates. I think NRC could also play, because people look at the rates bill and they see KDC, But NRC have put 16% on their rates as well, so that probably needs to be clarified in any letter that goes
Well,
out.
I have raised with the CEO about our position on challenging NRC.
Yep.
Can we, Mr. Chair, take away from this an action point that we do progress something in terms of this communication?
Well, I think,
I think that Sue raises a very valid point, which kind of might close the loop on all of this in terms of that. That we also explain that, hey, some of these increases are nothing to do with us from an NRC perspective as well. It might just.
and look, I totally agree with that, right?
Yeah, so just out of interest, you said that they came back and they changed some of the QVs. Did you say that they also mopped up people that hadn't complained, that were, for example, the next door neighbour of the person that did complain?
That's correct, where they felt it was going to be a large, so we went back to them and asked them that question and they said they had.
Okay.
That's what we were advised at LTP deliberation.
So we've done some work there pretty.
Yeah.
We've been pushing them all along, so, yeah.
I don't think we can take any, I think we just, hear what Sue is. Are you comfortable that Sue takes that on board in terms of what you're suggesting?
Well, yeah, I think Sue's taken it down as an action point. Let's work up a document that explains what's happened, what's been sorted through council's efforts, and also covers off on the NRC component, and then see where that lands, get a draft document and make sure we've got something that's going to go out, because it's really it's a political risk more than anything.
I don't think we need a resolution per se.
No, yeah.
The other risk, of course, is that we don't know is how many people are going to be defaulting on their rates because they've got $2,000 and $3,000 increases. That's a huge risk for us too.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, good.
Right. Okay. So right, now we go, right, no other comments on terms of my report, right?
It's at a slightly operational level, but it's something that the mayor raised to me before, and I think it's important to raise it because it is an immediate risk that probably needs mitigating. And we drove out Pahi Road yesterday, and there's a massive dropout on the side of the road with virtually no marking on it. Someone could probably drive off it in the night and kill themselves, quite frankly. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, no.
It's got no barriers, it's got no uprights to mark its location or anything, and I would have to ask.
Unless you know the road, you could get caught because.
Okay, we just note that, thank you. All right, Councillor Aaron.
Thank you. I mean, I thought this report was about the wider local government sector risks.
Yes,
If we're raising risks for our council, I was going to do it in the public.
I think we do it as public excluded.
Save it?
Yeah, save it. But to me, this is actually, I think, right, what I'm drawing, particularly those emerging risks, I think are serious for local government. And, there's going to be a day of reckoning. I reckon there's some councils that are not going to survive the next 3 years financially. Because of the costs that they are now being required to incur, and the inability of their ratepayers to meet those increased costs.
Cold hard reality.
Sorry? Yeah, and I think water done well is not going to solve the problem because those costs will just be transferred to another entity.
Still going to be local.
It's still going to be local. Yep.
Well, then if I could just make one comment about your report, like appreciate you bringing this forward. I guess the only comment that I would make is I can see all of these risks being a risk for us, but possibly in a different order.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe we actually, when we come to the public excluded reports say, how do these actually then apply what we have identified as part of our risk? But why I wanted this in open is I think it's, the community need to see these are consistent risks across all of local government and all public sector. And Kaipara District Council is not alone in facing these risks. We're not actually, in my opinion, having a collective discussion. Right? And my biggest risk is that first one, financial sustainability. Have been grown up having a conversation with everybody that can we afford the standard that we are now being required and is required for all our infrastructure? And do we actually have sufficient revenue being generated, whether it be rates, taxes or other, to pay for what is actually required for New Zealand? Have we set out the goalpost too high that we can no longer put the boot out, get the ball over by any means?
It's on its way.
All right, so there's a recommendation that we just note the chair's report. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Aaron. So Aaron and Councillor Mike, all those in favour, please say aye.
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 Carry. Then I have a mover that we move into public excluded.
Yep.
Mayor Craig, Councillor Aaron, all those in favour, please say aye.
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 Wait for 2 seconds to stop the recording. Change my screen.